My name is Ashley Carter. I'm 35 years old, and until a few months ago, my entire family believed I was nothing more than a failure, a dropout from the FBI who couldn't handle the pressure. For years, they whispered behind my back, crafting stories about how I lacked the discipline, the toughness, the mental fortitude that everyone else in the Carter family seemed to possess. My father, Douglas Carter, was a legendary FBI field agent. My brother Brian followed in his footsteps and quickly climbed the ranks. Even my younger sister Samantha was engaged to an ATF agent, proudly continuing the family's law enforcement tradition. And me, I was the cautionary tale. The one who tried but couldn't cut it. The one who, as they liked to say, was now working some quiet little government desk job filing paperwork somewhere in DC. They pitied me at family dinners. They whispered about me at weddings. They smiled politely when I was around, but behind those smiles was the unspoken belief Ashley failed. But what my family never knew, what they never even suspected, was the truth. The truth that I had built a career far beyond anything they could imagine. That while they saw me as the family disappointment, I had become one of the most trusted and highly ranked officers in the United States intelligence community. That while they were mocking my desk job, I was overseeing top-secret operations that directly protected not only them, but the entire nation. Everything they thought they knew about me shattered the moment the director of the CIA walked into my sister's wedding reception, spotted me across the room, and saluted. That one simple act exposed 15 years of secrets and changed everything. Before I tell you exactly how we got there and how my world collided with theirs in the most public, humiliating way possible, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss the rest of this story. Trust me, this one's going to sting. It was during a particularly monotonous task one afternoon that I caught the attention of someone who would change my life, Director Evelyn Sharp of the CIA's Cyber Special Projects Division. She had come to observe an interagency task force presentation that I happened to be assisting with. Afterward, she approached me directly. "You're not just filing reports, are you?" she said, studying me with sharp, calculating eyes. "No, ma'am," I replied carefully. "Show me what you're working on." I hesitated, but then pulled out a side project I'd been developing, a predictive algorithm that could analyze fragmented cyber attack patterns and forecast state-sponsored strikes weeks before they happened. Evelyn flipped through my findings, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. After nearly 30 minutes of silence, she looked up, smiling faintly. "You don't belong here, Ashley." I felt my stomach sink, assuming she meant I wasn't good enough. But then she added, "You belong somewhere far more important." Within 6 months, I was no longer working for the FBI. I was recruited into one of the most classified divisions of the CIA, operating under special access programs that even my father's top-level FBI clearance couldn't penetrate. My family never even knew I left. From that moment forward, my life split into two entirely separate worlds. By day, my family believed I was still working in some obscure federal agency buried under paperwork, counting down the hours in a cubicle somewhere downtown. By night, and often in ways they would never even imagine, I was leading operations that shaped the very security of this nation. At first, it was a surreal adjustment. The training was grueling, even for someone like me who lived inside algorithms and systems. I had to learn how to compartmentalize at a level few people ever face, not only in my work, but in my personal life. I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell Brian or Samantha. I couldn't tell anyone. The CIA's Cyber Special Projects Division wasn't something you talked about over Thanksgiving dinner. The scope of my work was so deeply classified that even my existence inside that world was legally invisible. I was briefed into special access programs that dealt with state-sponsored hackers, foreign intelligence services, and emerging threats so sensitive that failure wasn't an option, because failure meant lives lost, alliances shattered, and in some cases, war. Director Evelyn Sharp became my guide, my mentor, and in some ways the only person who truly understood the weight I carried. She saw in me not just a capable agent, but someone who could anticipate threats before they fully materialized. You see patterns like no one else I've met, she once told me. You don't just follow breadcrumbs. You predict where the breadcrumbs will fall before anyone even drops them. One of my earliest and most dangerous assignments was Operation Silent Hydra. We had intercepted intelligence that suggested multiple foreign adversaries were secretly coordinating to compromise the U.S. military's logistical command systems that controlled the movement of everything from aircraft carriers to nuclear warheads. Hydra wasn't just another cyber attack, it was a multi-nation collusion, a silent war brewing beneath the surface waiting for one synchronized strike that could bring the entire country to its knees. For 6 months, I led a covert task force analyzing cross-agency data, correlating seemingly unrelated incidents, irregular fuel supply orders, spoofed GPS satellite signals, fabricated maintenance logs, sudden financial trades that hinted at insider knowledge. One thread at a time, we unraveled the Hydra network. Every time I thought we reached the end, another layer appeared deeper, more complex, more dangerous. But we stayed ahead of them barely. We shut down Hydra 3 days before their planned activation. Had we failed, American military operations around the globe would have frozen overnight. The president himself signed off on our internal commendation, though of course none of it would ever be public. No medals, no speeches, no parades. Just a quiet acknowledgement in a secure room deep under Langley, surrounded by people whose very existence was classified. And while I was saving the country from collapse, my family remained completely oblivious. At family gatherings, Brian would still brag about his latest FBI busts. Samantha would beam as she discussed wedding plans, and my father would offer unsolicited career advice that reeked of thinly veiled condescension. So Brian asked one Christmas dinner, swirling his whiskey, "You still counting malware emails for the government?" I smiled politely. "Something like that." Dad chuckled. "You know, Ashley, it's never too late to get back into real service. FBI's always recruiting." Real service? The irony of hearing that after what I had been doing behind closed doors was almost comical, but I said nothing. I never said anything. Because I knew they wouldn't hear it, or worse, they wouldn't believe it. My silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. As my career soared, my personal life grew increasingly isolated. I couldn't date. I couldn't socialize like a normal person. Every relationship required elaborate cover stories and carefully crafted half-truths. The weight of secrecy pressed down on me more heavily than any operation ever had. That was until I met Ryan. He wasn't like anyone else in my life. Ryan was an intelligence officer in a sister agency, someone who understood the boundaries, the danger, the perpetual state of concealment. We met during a joint task force operation in Brussels. It wasn't love at first sight. It was respect at first operation. He admired my work, my mind, my instincts. And I admired his calm, his loyalty, and the fact that he never once flinched at the classified walls surrounding me. Slowly, methodically, we built a relationship built not on shared secrets, but on shared understanding of the burden those secrets carried. With each passing year, my double life grew more complicated. My professional responsibilities expanded exponentially as my reputation inside the intelligence community soared. Yet back home in the world where my last name still carried weight, but my work didn't, the dismissiveness from my family only grew sharper. At every family gathering, I was reminded that in their eyes, I remained the weak link, the one who had given up, the one who had chosen safety over real service. Brian loved to play the role of the older brother, protective but patronizing. "Ashley, you know you can always apply to transfer over to the bureau. I could pull some strings. We can find you something more meaningful than all that data entry." Samantha, sweet as always, chimed in with her usual rehearsed lines, trying to smooth things over while still feeding the same narrative. "Don't feel pressured, Ash. You're doing what works for you. Not everyone is cut out for field operations." Even my mother, sharp, calculating, endlessly concerned with appearances, had grown increasingly worried about my single status. Every phone call became a thinly veiled matchmaking attempt. "I met the nicest young man at the country club last week," she would begin. "He works in finance, very stable. I told him about you, at least what little I can explain, since you're always so secretive about your work." My father's dismissals were more direct, more cutting, delivered with that flat, authoritative tone only a man like him could perfect. "Your brother just wrapped up a major narcotics sting this week," he said over Thanksgiving dinner one year. "Real work, real risk, real impact. It's good to know at least someone's upholding the Carter name in federal service." I smiled, nodded, and excused myself to refill my wine. They had no idea that 2 nights prior, I had been in a secured underground room coordinating a joint cyber defense response that prevented a foreign state-sponsored ransomware attack targeting America's critical power grid. Real work, real risk, real impact. Just not the kind they could ever comprehend. It was after one particularly painful family gathering that Ryan finally confronted me. We were sitting on the balcony of our apartment in Arlington overlooking the Potomac River. The city lights shimmered below us, silent witnesses to our lives lived mostly in the shadows. "I don't understand how you do it," Ryan said quietly, handing me a glass of bourbon. "Do what I asked, though I already knew. Sit there, listen to them talk to you like you're some sort of fragile disappointment while you've accomplished more in 5 years than most of them will in a lifetime." I sipped my drink, letting the silence speak for a moment. "Because fighting them never changes anything," I finally said. "They've built a version of me in their heads. And anything I say to contradict that just feels like I'm trying to prove something. So I stopped trying. But you don't have to protect their feelings," Ryan pressed. "They don't deserve that." "No," I said softly. "But I deserve my peace. And honestly, the only way I've survived this long is by letting them believe what they want." Ryan reached over, gently squeezing my hand. "Someday they'll know." I smiled faintly, but inside I wasn't so sure. Maybe. Or maybe they never will. And maybe that's okay. At age 34, I was promoted to Division Chief, one of the youngest female officers ever to hold that rank in the CIA's Cyber Special Projects Division. The ceremony was private, held in a secured room deep within Langley's most classified sector. Only a handful of people attended: Director Evelyn Sharp, a few high-ranking officials, and Ryan. There were no speeches broadcasted, no press releases, no celebratory dinners. The world would never know my name. But the people who mattered most in my profession, they knew exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished. Evelyn handed me the official document, and for the first time since I had begun this journey, I saw a rare glimmer of personal pride in her eyes. "You've earned every bit of this," she said quietly. "I wouldn't have made it here without you," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Oh, you would have. I just made sure you had fewer idiots in your way." We shared a quiet laugh, the kind only people who operated at our level could fully appreciate. As we left the ceremony, Ryan pulled me into a quiet hallway away from the others. "You know they're going to find out one day, right?" I nodded. "One day. But not today." The invitation arrived on a crisp October morning. Samantha was getting married. The ceremony would be held at a historic estate in Charleston, South Carolina. Elegant, traditional, exactly the kind of high society event my parents loved to orchestrate. The envelope was thick, the paper heavy, the gold-embossed lettering practically screaming perfection. I stared at it for several minutes, my coffee cooling beside me. I hadn't decided if I was going to attend. Family gatherings had long become emotionally exhausting, a minefield of carefully concealed barbs and quiet dismissals. But this was my sister. For all her silence over the years, for all the times she'd stood by and let others belittle me, she was still my sister. That still meant something to me. Ryan found me sitting on the couch later that evening, the invitation still unopened on the coffee table. "You don't have to go," he said gently. "No one would blame you for protecting yourself." I exhaled slowly. She's my sister. Despite everything, I want to be there. But if I go, I'm going as family, not to make a statement. No uniform, no rank. This is her day. Ryan nodded, though I could see the hesitation in his eyes. If you change your mind, you know I can rearrange my schedule and fly down with you. I smiled. It's okay. It's just a few hours. I can handle it. The morning of the wedding, I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant navy blue dress, modest heels, minimal jewelry, hair pulled into a soft chignon. Civilian, unassuming, easy to disappear in a crowd. As I drove onto the estate, the white pillars of the grand mansion rising before me, my stomach tightened. This was familiar ground, but it never felt like home. My mother spotted me first. Ashley. Over here, she called, waving like we were the closest of families. My father stood beside her, posture perfect as always, Brian at his side, with his ever-present air of superiority. You made it? My father said, his tone laced with surprise, as if he hadn't actually expected me to show up. Good to see you making an effort for your sister's big day. I wouldn't miss it, I replied calmly. My mother linked her arm through mine as we walked toward the ceremony hall. You look nice, dear. A bit thin, perhaps. Are you eating properly? And your hair, you always had such pretty hair when you wore it down. I kept my expression pleasant, nodding politely, suppressing the years of irritation that threatened to bubble up. This was their way. We were intercepted by a group of uniformed officers, colleagues of my sister's fiancé. My father straightened instinctively, slipping into his old FBI persona with ease. Colonel Carter, one of the officers, greeted him warmly. It's an honor to meet you. Your daughter Samantha speaks highly of your service. The honor's mine, my father replied, shaking hands. The Carter family legacy continues strongly with Samantha. He placed a hand on my shoulder almost as an afterthought. This is our other daughter, Ashley. She tried the federal route for a while too, but it wasn't a good fit. The officers nodded politely, their interest in me immediately fading upon learning I was the civilian sister who couldn't hack it. Ashley has a desk job with the government now, my mother added in a stage whisper. We don't ask too many questions. She gets anxious talking about work. The heat crept up my neck, but I maintained my composure. This was nothing new, just another variation of the same narrative I'd endured for years. As we entered the hall, more introductions followed, each one layering another dismissive version of my supposed failure. Brian couldn't resist his usual jokes. Remember when she cried during that war movie? Should have been our first clue that playing soldier wasn't in the cards for her. Laughter rippled among his Marine friends. I smiled thinly, my jaw aching from forcing my expression neutral. Across the room, Samantha offered me a small apologetic smile, but said nothing. Her silence felt heavier than their words. By the time we were seated, I found myself contemplating escape. A sudden work emergency would be easy enough to fabricate. One phone call and I could vanish before the ceremony even began. But something inside me shifted. Running now would only validate everything they believed. Staying and enduring it with dignity was its own quiet form of strength. I straightened in my seat as the ceremony began. The color guard entered, the national anthem played, and the proceedings followed their carefully rehearsed script. I focused on my breathing, ignoring the buzzing in my ears, willing myself to remain invisible. But then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. The base commander stepped up to preside over the promotions. His name echoed through the speakers. Colonel James Harrison. My heart stuttered. I knew that name. We had worked together on a classified joint operation just months earlier. He had reported directly to me. I subtly angled my body away, lowering my gaze, hoping he wouldn't notice me in the crowd. Maybe protocol would prevent him from acknowledging me. Maybe I could still escape unnoticed. As he spoke about duty service and family sacrifice, his eyes scanned the room and then locked onto mine. His expression flickered with recognition, a brief pause betraying his surprise before he continued speaking. My pulse hammered in my ears as I silently begged him to move on to keep my secret intact. The ceremony concluded. Samantha stood proudly in her new rank, receiving congratulations from her peers, while my family beamed beside her. I hovered at the edge of the crowd, offering supportive smiles, but keeping my distance. And then I saw him. Colonel Harrison was making his way directly toward me. His stride was deliberate, his eyes fixed. Every instinct screamed at me to prepare for impact. He stopped in front of me, his voice steady but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Ma'am, you're the general. General Carter." A hush fell over the surrounding crowd. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. My father turned sharply, confusion washing over his face. "I didn't expect to see you here today," General Colonel Harrison continued, unfazed by the growing attention. "Your work on Operation Silent Hydra was exemplary. We're still implementing your protocols across multiple commands." The silence around us thickened. My family stood frozen, their expressions ranging from bewilderment to outright disbelief. "Thank you, Colonel," I replied evenly, my voice calm despite the storm brewing around me. "But today isn't about me, it's my sister's day. I'm here as family, not in an official capacity." His eyebrows lifted slightly at the mention of Samantha. "Your sister? I had no idea. That's remarkable. 2 Carters serving with such distinction. Your family must be incredibly proud." My father stepped forward, his voice tight. "There must be some mistake. My daughter Ashley works an administrative job. She's not—" "No mistake, Sir." Colonel Harrison interrupted politely but firmly. "General Carter is one of our top strategic leaders. Much of her work is classified, but within the intelligence community her reputation is well established." More officers began to gather around us, recognizing my name. One young major approached, eyes wide. "General Carter, you're the architect behind the integrated response protocols. We just completed training on your systems last month." Another officer chimed in. "Your keynote at the Joint Strategic Summit fundamentally changed our multi-branch operations. It's an honor, ma'am." The crowd thickened and my family stood in stunned silence, absorbing revelation after revelation as strangers listed my hidden accomplishments. My father's face had gone pale, his posture stiff. My mother stood frozen, one hand pressed against her lips. Brian's smug expression had evaporated entirely, replaced by wide-eyed confusion. But Samantha's face was the most complicated of all. Surprise, hurt, and something that almost resembled betrayal flickered in her eyes. Colonel Harrison, sensing the growing tension, offered me a polite out. "I apologize for interrupting your family celebration, General. Perhaps we can schedule a meeting next week to discuss the next phase of implementation." "Of course, Colonel," I answered smoothly. "My office will reach out." With that, he nodded and excused himself, the officers gradually dispersing behind him. But the silence that followed between my family and me was deafening. My father was the first to break it. His voice was low, barely controlled. "What exactly is going on here, Ashley?" I met his stare, steady and calm. "Perhaps we should speak privately." "Yes," my mother quickly agreed, her instincts kicking in, desperate to shield whatever was left of our family image. "Let's find a quiet room." We moved together as a unit toward a small conference room off the main hall. The door closed behind us with a soft click, and the questions erupted almost instantly. "A general," my father snapped. "When did this happen? Why would you keep something like this secret? How long has this been going on?" My mother's voice trembled. "Why wouldn't you tell us your own family?" Brian shook his head, still unable to process it. "There's no way. You outrank all of us. That's impossible." Samantha remained silent, her eyes locked on me, unreadable. I took a breath. The years of silence, the years of swallowing their judgments, all led to this moment. It's not a mistake. I am a general. I have been for over a year now. Before that, I held progressively higher ranks that I never discussed, because it became clear very early in my career that my achievements would never be recognized as valid by this family. They stared at me, stunned by my bluntness. My mother's face crumbled, confusion blending into pain. "But we're your family. How could you hide something this important from us for so many years? All those holidays, those conversations. Were you pretending all this time? I softened, but only slightly. I wasn't pretending. I was compartmentalizing. After years of having every military achievement dismissed or diminished, I made the decision to stop sharing that part of my life. Brian finally found his voice, his disbelief thick. General, that's not just some promotion. That's historic. That's significant. Yes, I said quietly. It is. I'm one of the youngest women to achieve this rank in my branch's history. My work has primarily been in strategic operations and intelligence, most of it classified. My father's anger began to return, his voice rising. And you never thought to mention any of this, not once, in all these years. When exactly should I have mentioned it, Dad? My frustration surfaced now, years of suppressed pain behind my words. When you told the Sullivans at Christmas that I just couldn't cut it in real military service, or when you explained to Grandpa that I'd found my level in some desk job, or maybe when you introduced me to your old FBI buddies as the daughter who tried but wasn't Carter material. Each example landed like a physical blow. My father's shoulders stiffened, but he had no response. Unexpectedly, Samantha spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but clear. We all did it. Or we stood by while it was done. She looked around the room, her gaze lingering on Brian and my parents. We created a story about Ashley that made sense to us. And even when the facts didn't fit, we forced them to fit our narrative. Her words cut through the tension like a blade. Hearing Samantha finally say it out loud after all these years sent a strange mixture of emotions through me. Sadness, relief, even a small spark of hope. My mother sat down heavily, her hand trembling slightly. All this time we've been telling everyone you couldn't handle military life, that you were lost. We pitied you, Ashley. Oh God, what have we done? My father remained standing, his military bearing intact, but his foundation clearly shaken. You should have told us, he insisted again, though. Now his voice lacked conviction. Regardless of our opinions, you should have set the record straight. I tried, I said sharply. After my first promotion, after my selection for special operations, after multiple commendations. But every single time my achievements were questioned, diminished, or attributed to some special favor or diversity initiative. Eventually, I stopped trying. I protected myself from exactly this moment. Brian, always the tactician, shifted into logistics mode. But how promotions are public? Ceremonies, records. How did you keep this hidden? Most of my work has been classified, I explained. The security clearance required limits what's publicly available. My promotion ceremony was private, under restricted access. And honestly, did any of you ever once check? Did you ever ask me directly about my rank? About what I really did? Or did you just assume? The silence answered for them. Just then, a soft knock interrupted us. Ryan stepped into the room, his face calm but watchful, immediately reading the emotional temperature. Sorry I'm late, he said softly as he crossed to stand beside me. His hand rested gently at the small of my back. Did I miss anything important? There was a beat of silence before Samantha gave a short, nervous laugh. You could say that. I smiled faintly. My family just found out I'm not quite the military failure they thought I was. Ryan scanned the room, taking in my family's stunned faces. Ah, so the truth finally comes out. He extended his hand toward my father. General Carter is one of the most respected strategic minds in the service, sir. Those of us who work with her consider it an honor. My father automatically took his hand out of reflex, his military courtesy stronger than his inner turmoil. Before anyone could respond further, another knock came at the door. Colonel Harrison appeared once more. Excuse the interruption, General Carter. There's an urgent matter requiring your attention. The timing was almost poetic. Of course, Colonel. I'll be right there. I turned back to my family. I have to take this. But this conversation isn't over. No, my father said, his voice unusually soft, almost hollow. It certainly isn't. The urgent matter was handled quickly. It was a minor question about a training protocol adjustment, something that could have easily waited. But I was grateful for the brief reprieve, a chance to catch my breath and steady my nerves. For years I had built walls to keep these two worlds separate. Now within the span of minutes they had collided completely. As I walked back toward the conference room, I could hear Ryan's voice before I even reached the door. He was speaking softly, but his words carried enough weight to stop me for a moment just outside. "She never wanted to embarrass any of you," Ryan was saying. "That's why she didn't correct the record publicly. But you should know that while you were telling everyone she failed, she was receiving commendations for operations that saved American lives." My father's voice was lower, almost inaudible. I couldn't make out his response. "With all due respect, Sir," Ryan continued, his tone still respectful but firm. "What you can't believe doesn't change reality. Your daughter is exceptional at what she does. Anyone who's served with her knows it. The only people who didn't are sitting in this room." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath before stepping back inside. The room had shifted slightly. The tension hadn't vanished, but something softer had begun to emerge in its place. A fragile, uncertain vulnerability. My father stood up as I entered. His military bearing remained, but his expression was no longer one of anger or confusion. It was something else entirely. Humility. "I think we need to start this conversation over," he said quietly. "There's clearly a lot I don't know about my daughter." 1 week after Samantha's promotion ceremony, my parents invited us all to dinner. It was the first time in years that we gathered outside of a holiday or obligatory event. My father had called personally to extend the invitation, a small but meaningful gesture that signaled how much had already shifted. As Ryan and I arrived at my parents' house, my mother greeted us at the door, her usual polished exterior softened. "Ashley. Ryan. Thank you for coming," she said, pulling me into a brief, tentative embrace. My father stood when we entered the living room, a courtesy he had never extended to me before in my own childhood home. Brian and Samantha were already seated, both of them watching carefully, as if still adjusting to the new reality they were only beginning to process. Dinner began awkwardly with safe conversation about the weather, traffic, and harmless local news. But eventually, my father set down his fork, folded his hands, and looked directly at me. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this past week," he began, his voice steady but softer than I ever remembered hearing it. "And I owe you an apology. Several, actually." The words stunned me into brief silence. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on outdated thinking," he continued. "I dismissed your achievements without ever really seeing them. I created a narrative about your military service that was completely false." His jaw tightened slightly as he forced himself to continue. "It's not easy for me to admit I was wrong, especially not about something this fundamental. But I was wrong about you, Ashley. Completely wrong." My mother reached across the table, gently placing her hand over mine. "We all were, dear." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening unexpectedly. "When Colonel Harrison called you General," my mother continued, her voice breaking slightly, "I thought there must be some kind of mistake. But then Ryan explained everything, your work, your rank, the operations. And I kept thinking, how could we not have known?" "Because I stopped telling you," I answered softly. After years of having every achievement questioned or diminished, I stopped sharing that part of my life. "That's on us," Brian admitted, surprising me. "We created an environment where you couldn't share your successes. That's not what family should do." Samantha finally spoke, her voice quiet but full of sincerity. "I knew something wasn't adding up. The way you carried yourself. The depth of your knowledge whenever military topics came up. But I never pushed past the family narrative. I should have been a better sister." Their apologies were sincere, but I knew better than to believe words alone could undo years of damage. Still, they mattered. They were a beginning. "I appreciate what you're all saying," I said carefully, "but this isn't something we can fix in one dinner. There are years of patterns we need to unlearn." "You're right," my father agreed quickly. "This is just the beginning. I'm not asking for instant forgiveness. I'm asking for the chance to get to know my daughter, the real daughter, not the version I assumed you would be. I'd like that I admitted, my voice quiet but firm, but it has to be different this time. I need to know that my achievements won't be dismissed or explained away. That you'll actually hear me when I speak. My mother nodded. What can we do to prove that to you? For starters, I said, offering them a small smile, you can start asking real questions about my work. What I can share anyway. Ask without assuming you already know the answer. That seems entirely reasonable, my father agreed with a nod. The conversation gradually shifted from there, becoming lighter, more natural. For the first time, they asked questions not to challenge me, but to understand me. I told them what I could about my leadership, my teams, my philosophy in high-level intelligence operations, and for the first time I saw them listening, really listening. The pain hadn't vanished, but something new had taken root. The possibility of an authentic relationship built not on who they imagined I should be, but on who I actually was. The healing process didn't happen overnight. In the months that followed, there were still awkward pauses, moments of discomfort, and occasional slips into old habits. But slowly, steadily, things began to change. My mother stopped trying to set me up on dates with men who had no understanding of my world. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions about the challenges of leadership, about the pressure that came with my rank, about how Ryan and I balanced two lives so deeply entwined with secrecy. Brian, after his initial difficulty accepting our reversed hierarchy, began to find something deeper than sibling rivalry. His competitiveness softened into genuine pride. He started sending me articles about military innovation and cyber strategy, not as some passive-aggressive jab, but because he finally respected my expertise. Samantha and I, perhaps the most surprising shift of all, began to build a real bond as sisters. For the first time, we spoke not as siblings trapped in an old dynamic, but as two women who both served, who both carried weight their parents would never fully comprehend. We found a strange comfort in that shared burden. But perhaps the most profound transformation was in my father. The man who had spent decades defining worth through rigid ideas of service and sacrifice now faced a truth he could not dismiss. His entire belief system had been challenged by my existence, and yet I watched him wrestle with that conflict and slowly release it. We started having quiet conversations, sometimes in his study, sometimes over long walks. He asked real questions, not to evaluate but to understand. He listened, and when he didn't understand, he admitted it. 6 months after Samantha's promotion ceremony, I received an invitation to attend a public recognition event in Washington, D.C. It was rare for my work to be acknowledged openly, but this particular award had been cleared for public disclosure, a strategic initiative I led that had dramatically transformed interbranch intelligence coordination across multiple federal agencies. For the first time, I sent formal invitations to my family. Honestly, I wasn't sure they would come. The venue was several states away. The timing wasn't ideal. I sent the invitations more as a gesture of inclusion than with any real expectation. But when I walked onto the stage that afternoon, scanning the audience, I saw them, all of them, dressed formally, sitting in the front row, their faces solemn, attentive, and unmistakably proud. My father sat tall, his expression composed, but his eyes soft. My mother dabbed at tears, unable to hold them back. Brian and Samantha both stood at attention in their own formal uniforms when I was introduced. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photographs, my father approached me. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, taking in my full dress uniform, the stars on my shoulders, the medals across my chest. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, but I'm learning." He extended his hand formally, respectfully. "Congratulations, General Carter. Your service honors this family." The words I had once longed for no longer carried the weight they once did. I didn't need his validation anymore to know my own worth, but still hearing them meant something. "Thank you, Dad," I said, shaking his hand, then pulling him into a brief hug. "That means something." But you should know I would have done this even if you never recognized it. I had to learn to define success on my own terms. He nodded slowly, the understanding settling in his eyes. And that, I suspect, is what makes you a great leader. In the years that followed, our family continued to grow, not perfectly, but honestly. Old patterns didn't vanish entirely, but now, when tensions arose, we had the tools to face them. The unspoken judgments were replaced with real conversations. The assumptions were replaced with questions. And above all, there was finally respect. What I came to realize was this: my journey was never really about proving my family wrong. It was about giving myself permission to stop needing their approval. Their recognition, when it finally came, was meaningful, but it wasn't what defined me. The true victory had always been choosing to believe in myself when no one else did. Building a life that was true to my own vision, not theirs. And so I leave you with this. Sometimes the most powerful validation isn't convincing others to see your worth. It's building a life so rooted in your own purpose that their opinions become irrelevant. Your greatest recognition will always be the one you give yourself. Toi dung o jai nhu. Vai chung tavua hoan, tan tuan bo full script, lien mach jung logis, kichban gosen hung, voi noi dung moi drama, hon kam ksuk honva, kuk kifu, hop jechuyen hoa tan video viral, dai 11 labs voice gu, chan nguoi, ksem kuk kao.